everybody, welcome. I'm Daniel G. Garza, and this is another episode of Put It Together Conversations. I'd like to welcome everybody who's watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. Thank you for joining us. Remember that you can be part of the conversation too, so make sure that you type in any questions, any comments, and I will make sure that our guests get to read today. Our guest today is Nick Leighton, and I'm sure I pronounced that wrong, but let me tell you about Nick Leighton is the Champagne Moment Coach. He has spent the past 20 plus years working with business owners, not only to take their business to the next level, but to have fun while doing so. He believes anyone can achieve the dream. It's just a matter of channeling their motivation in the right directions, setting goals, and putting in place the necessary strategies, systems, and processes to stay accountable and grow their business the smart way, not the hard way. In his personal and professional life, Nick has always been driven by a spirit of adventure, a certain joie de vivre, and that he inherited from his parents. Born on a small Greek island, he started his first business at the age of 13. Now, as a serial entrepreneur who has worked all over the globe, he speaks worldwide. Nick is an adjunct professor at Chapman University. Hello, everybody at Chapman, and a regular guest speaker at UCLA and USC, which is actually, for those of you that know Christian, that's his alma mater. Remember, I didn't mention this, but Put It Together Conversation is a show about you, where you come from, where you are now, and what your journey is like. And the idea is to motivate you and inspire you to go after your own dreams and goals. And with that said, let me bring him on board. Hello, Nick.
Hey, how you doing, Daniel? Great to see you.
Good to see you, sir. Leighton, right? Leighton, I said that right. I always ask my guests, because I tend to mess up names, so I'm glad I got that right.
That's awesome. That was awesome. That was good.
How are you?
I am doing great. I am working on a lot of really fun things, so I'm having a great day.
Good. So for those of you that always hear the stories of how I met my guest, Nick and I met on Lunch Club, and you folks have heard me talk about Lunch Club for quite a bit. And if you don't know about it, I will make sure to send you or post my link so you can get connected. Lunch Club is basically a website where they connect you with people either in your choice career or preferences or likes and dislikes, and connect you with people. And Nick and I were connected on Lunch Club.
That's right. I don't know what AI they use to do that, but they do it so well.
Right. I know that sometimes I've connected with like some scientist guy from like Australia, and I'm like, I don't know. And then halfway through the conversation, I'm like, oh, I get it. I get it. You and I had a lot of entrepreneurial likes, and we have a lot of connections. Quick connection is that I had done art acting jobs at Chapman, and I was like, oh yeah, I know Chapman. So how did you get on Lunch Club, and how long have you been on there?
I think I've been on Lunch Club for, I don't know, nearly a year or so. And just like you, my experience has been that because you know who you're going to meet before, you see the invite come in, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure me and this person are going to be able to jive, or like, well, we're going to have a value for each other. But it always works out. It's amazing. I love it. I gotta say.
And by the accent, I'm thinking like Kentucky, Louisiana.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Texas. That's exactly right. But no, as you said at the beginning, I was born on a small Greek island, so yeah, I've got an accent or two, right?
I'm sure you've heard that dad joke plenty of times, but I had to say it anyway.
Yeah, no, it's all good. That's what I say to people. People go, "Where are you from?" Like, Texas, of course. You can tell.
Of course, yeah. No. We could change my hair color. We could be brothers.
Right. There you go. And that's So I grew up in England in a British boarding school. And I'm sure you've seen like Harry Potter, and that's pretty much what boarding school is like in England. That's what mine was like anyway, except for we didn't have the moving staircases. But you alluded to at the beginning of the show that my first business was when I was 13 years old. So I was at boarding school, and I think we're only talking among friends, right? So I can be honest and open with everyone here. So my first business was selling Playboy magazines. My mother would send them to me in the mail because I was at an all-boys boarding school, and I would sell the Playboy magazines. That was my first business. And if anyone is thinking about distribution models and stuff like that, trust me when I say that it's better to rent out Playboys than it is to sell Playboys. I'll just leave it at that, okay? Now you're shocked and you don't know what to ask me next, right? There we go.
I have all kinds of follow-up jokes to
I'm sure you
that.
do.
It's like,
I'm sure you do.
like I was gonna say, I'm not gonna say it, but I was gonna say, sounds like a sticky job for me, but
Oh,
I'm not gonna say it because
no,
it
no, don't
sounds,
say that.
yeah, no,
No,
no, no. It's not
right.
that kind of show, folks.
It is not.
Uh, but based on the conversation that we had, there were
Yeah.
so many things about you that I really did find so interesting.
Mhm.
So without much more, I'm gonna let it go and be
Sure.
Nick Leighton. Tell us how you put it together.
Sure. Well, I mean, let's talk about exactly where you want to be. And so that's kind of the brand that I talk about. That's the name of my book. And so I guess the moment that you know where you are exactly where you want to be. So that's what I work with people. But it happened to me at a very bizarre time. I was living in Dubai at the time, and I traveled to Pakistan for a client. Our client was the United Nations. So we were doing charity aid work for the United Nations. And the United Nations came to us because I owned an agency at the time, a marketing agency. And they said, look, we have this challenge that we're not getting enough donations, and we need to publicize all the good work we do around the world so more people will give money. And so I sat down with the other people in my agency. I'm like, this seems like a great cause. Let's do this. Let's see if we can bring some children out of hunger. This would be amazing. So they said to us, the United Nations said to us, well, what we'd like you to do is find the journalists around the world who are writing in the most prestigious newspapers, who are the best known, and bring them to one of our events and let them see and let them report on what we do. This will get the word out. We thought this is great. So we found about 15 journalists from around the world, and we flew them to Pakistan so they could see the work that had happened. So to do that, we first of all landed in Karachi, and we took them to embassies, and we met with the highest people. We met with the president, we met with the prime minister, we met with the head of the military police. All the dignitaries were there to showcase what they were doing at the city level. But then we had to go out and show the aid work the United Nations were doing. So we got into helicopters, 2 helicopters, big Russian helicopters, and we went up into the Kashmir region, which is the mountain range between India and Pakistan. And I'm basically looking after 15 journalists in Pakistan. I hadn't thought that through exactly. So I'm looking out the window, and I realized that we're not actually on the flight path that I thought we were going to be on. So I unbuckle. And this is not like some luxury helicopter, trust me. There's like corn in the middle of this helicopter. We're delivering food as we go. And I go up to the pilot, and I'm like, why are we here? We should be kind of over there. And he looks at me, and he says in this big, thick Russian accent, which I won't do. He goes, you see the 2 F-16s out the window? They're telling us where to go. I'm like, oh. I'm like, do you want to tell me more? He goes, we're being hijacked. I'm like, oh, good to know. So I go back into the helicopter. I don't say anything to all the people there because I don't want to get them too crazy and rolled up. But the planes tell us where the 2 helicopters where to land, and they land us in what was a school. So it was a field surrounded by men with machine guns, and they asked us to get off the helicopters, get onto a truck, and of course we did that. And then after a 5-10 minute ride in the back of the truck, we ended up in what looked like a camp, and it was an aid camp delivered by the military police. And they gave us tea and cookies. They were very polite to us. But believe me, I tried to walk outside of where the main group was, and that wasn't going to happen. So it was me, it was a photographer who worked with me, and 15 international journalists. And people ask questions because they're journalists and they're like that. I didn't say anything. And after about 20 minutes, they said, thank you very much for coming. And they put us back on the truck, and they delivered us back to the helicopter. And we're like, seems a bit strange. And what had happened is I got one of the UN guys to kind of speak to people. It's like, well, they know that the journalists are here in Pakistan because you met everyone yesterday. You met all the important people. And you know that they know these journalists will report on what they see. So you're about to take them to the United Nations camps, but they wanted the world to see what they're doing. But they had no way of how to deal with that in a PR way, I guess. So they just used brute force. But at that moment that I was being hijacked, I was with journalists. I was working for a charity organization that I knew, respected, and wanted to do much for. And although it seemed like a strange situation to be in, I knew at that point I was exactly where I wanted to be. I was doing what I wanted to do in the way. And earlier we were talking, it was like, When you're doing stuff, it clicks, it happens quickly, it's all great. It didn't matter that there were guns or fighters. It meant that I was with the people who I could communicate with clearly and I could get things done. So that's part of exactly where you want to be, doing what you love, that you have passion for.
Now, taking that story into consideration, like there's a couple of things that I wrote down as like brute force kind of, but I feel like life gives you, if you're open to life, if you're open to the universe and what it's giving you, like it will push you in the direction that you want to go. Like because as you're telling the story about, there's this other helicopters kind of pointing in the direction. I feel like, I know metaphorically, I was like, well, that's kind of like life in the universe going, this is the direction I want you to go.
Right.
You may not understand it, but trust me. Trust me. And then for some reason, transparency popped into my head. Like there was this level of transparency that needed to be, like that you were on this mission for transparency and this other group wanted to be transparent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, transparency is really, really important. Being authentic, and I'm sure you talk about that a lot in your show, that authenticity is really a vital part of what goes on. And we have a way of talking in the world of media relations, and that's kind of where I come from, PR, where you've got to always tell the truth, but you may not have to tell everything. So there's authenticity, there's transparency to a certain level, but truth above all else.
Yeah, transparent doesn't mean all of it. It just means what I tell you comes with an open. Right. Have you to get to the point where you are now? Has that been a big factor for you growing up?
Yes and no. With people, to be authentic, yes. But not always straight away. I mean, sometimes it takes some kind of level of trust to build a relationship, to be transparent with someone. And that's kind of a game that I play on a daily basis. How quickly can you build trust with someone so you can ask them a question which might be difficult to answer otherwise? So I work predominantly with owners of companies. And one of my first conversations with them is to see if they need coaching or if they can use what we do, is I'll ask them about their business. And the first question, is how's business? And it's the natural instinct to say, it's all great. Well, okay, that's cool. Let's see if we can get to a deeper level. And how much have we got to trust each other for you to really say, well, actually, I had a $3 million business last year, and this year it's 2.2 million. I'm down 800,000 and I've lost 3 key people. How quickly can you get to that trust level? That's really important because you've got to work with people you trust. Your team you've got to trust. And if you're working with any kind of outside coach, there's got to be a trust level there. I'm sure you see that on the emotional level. When you're doing readings, I'm sure as much as you do a reading with someone who you could trust rather than someone who's got this roadblock, right?
Yeah, I think that would be one of the similarities between what you do in like business coaching and what I do in spiritual coaching is if you're not going to trust me and your answers are, I wrote down here, fine, everything's fine, then what are we doing here?
Right.
Why are we sitting across from each other? If everything's fine, then why do you need me? But the way I see it sometimes is that before you can establish that with other people, there has to be a level of honesty with yourself.
So right. Yes.
How did you get to that point? And
yeah, that's a great question. No. It's an awesome question. And it's really vital. So although I'm a business coach, the reason that I coach business owners because I want them to achieve what they want to do personally. So how do I get the real them? And I think the best way to describe it, and anyone who's listening to this can do this exercise, it's to create your personal vision. Now, you could be scrapbooking, but I think we've moved on from the world of scrapbooking. So, I'm sure you could set up a little account and put up pretty pictures. But I do it through a series of 15 questions. And it's 15 questions, and you can ask them yourself. And I'll share them with everyone afterwards. But if you read the questions yourself and you just write down some bullet points, you begin to understand what's important to you. And you go through, what do you love doing? what are the things you just don't want to be doing? How important is family life to you? What sports or hobbies do you have? Health, nutrition, any spiritual beliefs, any humanitarian interest? And if you ask those 15 questions and you get some bullet points, you can actually write down in 100 words what your personal vision is. And that's pretty real. And then that leads to what I think is the most important thing, which is the champagne moment. So if you're true to yourself, doesn't matter what you do in work, if you're true to yourself, what's the one thing you want to do personally in the next year to two? So I've asked hundreds of people what their champagne moment is. And when they understand that concept, they're like, well, really what I'd like to do is never have to work on Fridays. Okay. What I really want to do is buy my first home. Okay. What I really want to do is set up this charity. Okay. These are all things that you want personally. Now, how do we use the power of your business to achieve that? Now, business owners are different from other people as they have this ability, they're blessed that they can write their own job description. So that's what I work with. But anyone can take the concept of, this is my personal vision. Now, how do I use my work to give me the finances and the freedom to do what I want to do?
Gotcha. Before you continue, I want to remind everybody, you're watching Put It Together Conversations. I'm your host, Daniel G. Garza. My guest today is entrepreneur, and I forgot to put their names up. Nick Leighton is our guest today, and we're talking about transparencies, trust, and champagne moments, which is the first time, again, talking about Lunch Club. When Lunch Club comes, there is either an email where you can email each other, or there's a chat box where you can connect with each other. I guess it depends on preferences. But Nick and I had each other's email address, and normally you're encouraged to reply and say, hey, look forward to meeting you. Mm-hmm. But Nick sent me a video greeting, which first I was like, who is this dude and why is he sending me a video? And in the video, he was asking me what my champagne moment was. And I'm going to be honest, the first I was like, this dude, like really, like right, like you're not coaching me, we're just meeting each other. But I'm going to be honest, it really got me thinking. It got me thinking once I went in and looked you up, because of course, me being me, I had to like, who is this Nick Leighton? Why is he sending me this? But once I looked you up and started doing a little research on who you were, I was like, oh, I get what he means. Like, what is this? What is my champagne moment? And oddly enough, I already had, before knowing you, because of my life, and last year, I already had what I was working towards. Mm-hmm. But where did the concept of champagne moment come from? How did you come to that?
I think it's when I was living in the Middle East, because it's a dry state. No, not because it was dry, but I think it was being quite goal-orientated, and suddenly realizing at one point while I was growing and building a company, I was, in that .com era where everything was growing and bigger and better, and we're hiring more people and making more money, and that was awesome. And it was a self-actualization moment where I'm like, okay, we're bigger than last year, but why? Why does that matter? And, sometimes it takes things around you, the people around you and the relationships you're in, to make you stop for a moment and go, okay, well, what's really important here? Is it important that I grow to the next level or achieve something that other people think is important in life? Or we hire the next person, our team gets to a certain size? Or is it more authentic than that? Is it the quality relationships we have around us? And it took a place like Dubai, which I lived in for a number of years and I loved, but is very unauthentic, for it to be right in my face, where everyone had fast, expensive cars and everyone lived in amazing houses. Dubai's like Las Vegas on steroids. Wow. But everyone there is successful. There's no unemployment. There's nothing bad going on. There's no theft. You're living in this crazy, crazy world. And I began to realize that there's no sense of community. The relationships that I can have here aren't as real as they could be in other parts of the world that I'd lived in. And I think that was what brought it home to me. I'm like, okay, there's more to this. So that's where the personal vision came in. That's where the champagne moment comes in, because it's personal.
And what was your first champagne moment? And then next to that, can that change?
Oh, right. Okay. So your champagne moment, yes, I think every year or two, if you hit your champagne moment, then you're going to find something else. So often when I talk with people, I start by saying goals suck, because goals for the next million or the first million sucks. But a champagne moment is something which is awesome to experience, because you want it for yourself. Now you have to use goals to get there. So I had a goal of, wanting to have certain relationships, or writing a book, or I hear all kinds of goals which are really valuable. Getting my son into college was a goal. It was a personal goal. But there are things that your business allow you to do that make that possible, to spend time with someone, to help them in a certain way. So most of the goals I see are quite personable. They're often related to other people. So yeah, that's it. So my last goal, well, maybe not my last goal, one of my significant goals was to write a book. How many people do you hear who say, oh, I want to write a book? And doesn't happen. Now, the power of a champagne moment is you tell someone else. So I sat down with my family. I'm like, hey, by the way, champagne moments, I know you've heard me talk about it. This is my champagne moments for this year. I'm going to finish this book. And they're like, well, you haven't started the book. I'm like, yeah, well, I got to tell you I'm going to finish it. And then we'll put a plan in place to finish it, right? So that's fun. My next champagne moment is actually to speak at either Davos or a large United Nations event, so I can help a number of people in what I do in my area, the area that happens quickly, that we all love, that connection area.
So that's pretty interesting, because one of the things that I love about hosting an interview show and getting to meet people, especially people like you, is that sometimes the concepts come up and I'm like, oh my God, I'm already doing that. Like, how cool is that? Like, I didn't even know I didn't know it had a name, or somebody had given it a name, because at the beginning of 2020, I'd always wanted to write a book, but I didn't know what I wanted. Right now I'm in the process of, I've already started writing my memoir. So awesome. It's already started. And that's a champagne moment, because I want to share my story in advocacy and life. But back in the beginning of 2020, I was like, I'm going to write a book. And in May of this year, my children's book came out. So I was like, yes. And then what I use in my personal spiritual coaching is my own deck of alignment cards, energy alignment cards, which is this is the prototype for it. And
you showed me last time. I love that. That's amazing.
And so by the time we met, and I think that's okay. So this is one of the things, and this is going to lead to another question. By the time you asked me, I was like, how dare you? But I was like, dude, calm down. You're already on the process. So maybe it bugged me because I was already on a journey and I felt awkward to be questioned by it. But do you ever find people that you work with that when you get to that moment, like, fight you back? And does that make sense?
No, it's definitely a journey. So
now, before you answer, I want to make sure that you saw this comment, because Maria Lynch wants to know that you are very cute.
Well, no, actually, I think she was talking about you. But anyway, okay, we'll carry on. Yeah.
No, this is about you. And yes, thank you. That's about me. No, but the cuteness was about you. So let's be fair. But yeah, so how do you work with somebody, a client that, like, part of the journey is to have that champagne moment, and they're fighting you on it?
Right. So first of all, goals suck because when you hit them, you've got nowhere else to go apart from X% more. That's how goals work. So goals suck for that reason. Also, your goal can be wrong. Let's face it. Most people aren't great at setting goals. So as I like to say to people, let's imagine you're taking off from Los Angeles airport and you want to go to New York. But if you get off by 1, maybe 2 degrees, you're going to be in a different state. So it's easy to go off in the wrong direction. You've also got this blinker vision. If you were just following goals and COVID hit, you would still be chasing your goal, which may not be appropriate. So there's lots of reasons why goals don't work. Now, a champagne moment is a destination. So you talk about a journey. So I like to think of it like riding a bicycle. So you are in control of your life, and your pedals are connected to your back wheel. So your back wheel is kind of like your work life. And the faster you pedal, the more power you have. That's the more money you get, the more freedom you get. Your front wheel, that's your personal vision I talked about earlier. That's guiding you. And you're connected with your handlebars to that front wheel. So if your work life and your back personal life are aligned, it's like cycling downhill with the wind behind you. Things become really easy. And that's where the journey takes you to your champagne moment. That's when I talk about having passion with what you do. It all makes sense. It all comes together. Things happen quickly. It's cool. The connections work. But it's when you're not aligned with yourself and your work isn't what you love doing, your wheels are going to go in different directions. You're going to fall off your bicycle. And people who I see who get in, need time out from work, who have breakdowns, whatever you want to call it, who aren't doing well, it's because their personal and their work life are just not aligned. They're not doing what they should be doing. But if they're aligned, that's great. Then it's a journey. And then when I talk to people, they're like, yes, you're right. It doesn't matter that my business changes slightly because my journey is taking me to my champagne moment, which is buying a house, working in Italy for 3 months, whatever that might be.
Gotcha. Before you continue, ladies, just remind everybody you're watching Put It Together Conversations. I'm your host, Daniel G. My guest today is Nick Leighton, and we're talking about champagne moments, setting your, I'm going to put it in quotes, goals, and how to reach them. Now, one of the things that has happened over the last year and a half when we're in lockdown is a lot of people started to question the journey that they were on and what they were doing for work and their life purpose. Do you think that sometimes we can't identify a champagne moment because we're not on the journey that we're supposed to be on, or we're following somebody else's journey per se?
Sure. I think if we're not in touch with ourselves, if we don't have a clear personal vision, then that's not going to happen. Now, does the personal vision change? Yes. And it takes large events for that to happen. So I'll give you a non-COVID example. Before COVID happened, I was working with a successful business owner. He has a team of 12 people, and he's doing great. He's been in business for 20 years, and we were working on revenue and things like that. And I walked in one day to see him, and he's like, "My goals have changed." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "My wife is just being diagnosed with this condition. That is my priority." He'd been married for, at that time, 25, maybe 30 years. He's like, "Doesn't matter what happens to this business. My wife's my priority. Getting her better is my priority. My business is just a tool to do that." So yeah, absolutely, things change for reasons not beyond our control. And I think COVID was this en masse. Everyone got hit by the same time. So I think that's why there's a lot of people going through that question right now. And they've got to find their own authentic, genuine self. And that's really, really important. So the flip side of that is if you're a business owner, it's really hard to hire people right now because people are saying, actually, no, I don't want to go and do this 9-to-5 thing that I didn't love anyway. And that's totally legitimate. So from an individual level, yes, stop doing what you don't want to do. Find what you do want to do. Now, if you're a business owner, let's attack that in a different way. Don't try and force people to do jobs they don't like. Let's see what technology exists so we don't need to rely on people. Let's work on different processes within an organization so less people can do more. Let's make our jobs more satisfying. So there's lots of things we can do at the corporate level as well. So yeah, people are going through that, and both individuals and businesses will deal with that.
I'm so glad you said that it can change, because sometimes culturally, religiously, social status, whatever, we are fed this idea that we need to be on a certain journey. For instance, me growing up, my parents, their goal for me was grow up, finish high school, go work in a factory, rent a house for 50 years, maybe get married, have a couple of kids, and be happy. Just be happy, because that's what we're doing, and we're okay, so you be okay. And it's good to know, because a lot of us needed that permission from somebody else to know that we could change our direction. Now, we do have a comment and question for you on the board.
Okay.
Nick sounds like he has traveled and lived in many places. What was his childhood like? He mentioned his mother sent him Playboy magazines at 13. She sounds like a very open, liberal, free-spirited soul. So I guess the question is,
Absolutely.
what was your childhood like?
Yeah, well, great question. So, why did my mother send me to boarding school? Probably for two reasons. One, because I'm dyslexic, and that seemed like a good place for me to get a good education while I lived in the UK. And two, because at that time she was single. My mother and father have 7 marriages between them. That's a lot of marriages. They were never married to each other. So yes, my mother was quite free-spirited, and so I had that when I was growing up, and she's a wonderful woman. To this day, she's great, and we could get on great. Also, I'm an only child. I don't know what that has to say for things, but the other only children I seem to know seem to have a whole different relationship with parents. But growing up, boarding school was fascinating. You get to learn a lot about other people. I would probably tell you, I went to boarding school at a young age. I was probably about 10 years old when I first went to boarding school. So for the first year, I probably cried every single day. But after that, I loved it. It brings independence. In England, it's considered a good thing to do, more so than maybe in other countries. So it brought independence. It allowed me to experiment with all kinds of things that I don't think you necessarily would do under your own family home, under your family roof, maybe. That was fun. It definitely fueled the entrepreneurialism that I see. A lot of my friends who went to boarding school have their own businesses, disproportionate amount, for sure. You just work things out. There's less people to help you in a way. But on the downside, it also makes you quite unreliable in a steady relationship. So, for example, if I want to go to the store, I'm just going to leave here and go to the store. I'm not going to tell the people in my house that I'm going to the store because I'm just used to being independent, even though I've been married for many years. So there's things is good and bad. But growing up, that was great. I then left boarding school. I went to college, university in Leicester, middle of England, and I studied psychology and mathematics, which is an interesting mixture. I then did my first exchange to North Carolina. I didn't actually want to go on an exchange to North Carolina. I really want to go to Russia, truth be known. So we're talking, the time when Russia was kind of interesting. And a friend of mine were in my car, and he's like, I want to go on exchange. And I'm like, yes, I want to go on exchange as well. And he said, where do you want to go? I said, Russia. He says, no, I want to go to America. And I'm like, no, I think Russia would be more fun. He's like, too bad, I've already filled in your form and I've submitted it. I'm like, oh, great. As it turned out, I got chosen to go to America and he didn't. So that was the end of our friendship. But I ended up in North Carolina. And apologies for anyone who is from North Carolina or is watching from North Carolina. That was an interesting experience. North Carolina has some similarities with us here in Los Angeles. It's a very big film industry there. It was certainly at the time. But even though I was with college students, the questions I was getting, I couldn't quite believe. These are legitimate questions. Can you see the moon from England? I mean, this is a college person asking me this question. Like, are there any beaches in England? I'm like, yeah, we're an island. We've got a few beaches. I mean, their perception of the world, because people, I guess, don't travel quite as much, was very different from when you grew up in Europe. Sure, I had a business at the age of 13, but by the age of 15, I was traveling to other countries just with friends. Go over to France and do something. That wasn't a big deal. So then you have a whole different perspective on cultures, maybe you meet different people growing up in that kind of environment. So anyway, I did an exchange in North Carolina, went back to England, did an MBA, worked in small companies and then in large companies before I kind of set out on my own.
Now, you didn't answer the question, Dale. Can you see the moon from England?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, it depends if it's a red moon or blue moon. Yeah.
Gotcha. I just want to make sure that, I'm asking for a friend, not for me. You brought up an interesting point because we're definitely, we're talking about your champagne moment. And ultimately, some people might understand that as my goal, my dream, what I'm working towards. It's one thing when you're single and you're like, this is what I'm going after, like this is what I want to do. And then it's a total, or is it a total different beast when you're in a relationship? Can you have a personal champagne moment and a relationship or something that you share with your spouse or partners?
Great question. A lot of entrepreneurs are very unsuccessful in having a stable relationship. And I see that a lot. In fact, the most aggressive entrepreneurs, if you want to put it that way, the most dominant, the ones that are trying to build the quickest, actually have very poor relationships outside of work. Those that understand themselves a little bit more are a little bit more open to relationships, but they maybe not quite as ruthless when on the business front of things. So I think there's definitely a correlation that you're seeing there. I believe that certainly most entrepreneurs that I work with, most business owners, can be more balanced now. I think society has changed. I think people are working from home more. I think it's more open. I mean, let's face it, let's say 6-7 years ago, if you said you worked with your partner or someone of your family, that was frowned upon. I mean, really, people would change their name so it wasn't so obvious. Now it's totally legitimate to do that kind of thing. So yes, I think there could be definitely some shared champagne moments. I'm certainly not a relationship expert, but I've been married for over 15 years, and there are certainly some things there which are around communications and wanting to do things together, which I think are important for many relationships.
Yeah, because I will raise my hand. I'm one of those people. I had my production company. I did my things. I was working on growing my business, and then right before the lockdown came in, we Christian and I, my partner and I, we talking about, would you want to go into business together? He wanted, he saw the steps and the strides that I was taking in my career, and he was like, I want to be part of that. So I was like, okay, fine, let's go into business together. I'm going to be honest, and I'm sure if he sees this, he knows because I've mentioned it. I had doubts. I'm like, I love you, and I like you, and I'd like to keep it that way.
Right.
I don't know if us being business partners will translate from being life partners.
Totally agree.
And
Yeah.
it's taken. I mean, there's moments when I'm like, no, we're not going to do it that way. And but there, and where I'm getting to is, like, sometimes I have to be a little selfish, and I'll use that in quotes, selfish, and think, well, this is my dream and my goal. I mean, we're going to go back to goals. And for champagne moment, this is my champagne moment. I want to grow the business in this direction and do that. I guess my question is, uh, have you had clients in that situation, and what would be your words of encouragement or your?
So when I first meet with business owners, it can go one of either way. So sometimes they'll come to me and it'll be maybe a family business, it'll be brothers or siblings or two generations working together. That's fascinating because that has its own complexity. Just two partners, business partners without any relationship to each other working together has its complexities. Then I'll also be working with business owners, and this has happened multiple times, where they're considering marrying someone who may or may not be even involved in the business. But how will that affect their business? So I've sat down with partners, business partners, and I've gone through that exercise of that personal vision for both of them. And then when I'm working with businesses, my next thing is a business vision. Where do you see the business going? And I go through a similar set of questions that I did for the personal vision. And after that meeting, I've had two partners from the same business look at each other and go, we shouldn't be doing this together. We both actually want to be going in different directions. So that's where you're going. Now, my wife and I have separate businesses. Occasionally we have to work together. When we work together, we fight like cat and dog. But the end result's fantastic for the client. But so yeah, we have different ways of doing it, but we are going in the same direction. So yeah, I think there's an interesting way of doing things. I've worked with so many family businesses where the siblings don't get on with each other, or they don't want to work together. They don't see the same way of working together, and that's really hard. Really hard to break businesses down so everyone benefits. There aren't sore feelings. Financially, you're secure, but also emotionally, you can have a relationship outside of work. It's really hard.
Well, I'm going to remember that the next time that Christian and I get into a fight. I'm like, look, Nick and his wife fight, we can fight.
It's positive energy. Let's make this for the greater good. Exactly. Yeah.
Now, you talked about the 15 questions that you have with clients. Can you share with us maybe
Absolutely.
2 or 3 questions
Yep.
that we can start our own journey on?
Yeah. So the first question is the hardest question. That's your why. Why are you just doing stuff? Some people know that. Some people are more in touch than others. Some people can go, yes, you know what, I've done an exercise once, I got this. So that's the first question. Some people just don't have an answer, and that's totally fine. The second question is, what do you love doing? What part of your day do you love? And then the third question is, if you could delegate anything and everything, what don't you want to be doing? So that's a great place to start. Then we really go into what you want to get out of it. So if you could work any number of hours in a day or in a week, how many hours would you be working? I find that fascinating. For entrepreneurs, they either want to work 20 or 80. No one wants to work 40. So I'm like, okay, fine. We've got to then okay, let's talk about vacation. How much vacation time do you want? Where do you want to go? What's important as far as vacation? People view vacations in different ways, but it's a vital part of everyone. Either you work for vacations or the vacations work for you. And it's fascinating to see how people can break that down. Then we talk about money. How much money do you really need that gives you the security and the safety for your family unit? What's important? Where do you want to get to? It's not where you are now, but how much do you really need? And I hear everything for that answer. Some families, $100,000 in a year is more than enough to keep them going. Other people go, $249,000 a year. I'm like, okay, fine. He's like, that because that's $1 less than what I'm going to get taxed at a different break. I'm like, okay, some people, whatever it's going to take. Okay, because there's no right or wrong answers to any of these. And then we go through outside of money, what's important to you? How do you want to be recognized? And there are lots of ways you can be recognized, just as a pillar of community, as a leader of an organization, an author, a speaker, whatever that might be. So what are those things that are important? And then we look at hobbies and interests. As I also mentioned, spiritual beliefs, humanitarian interests, the amount of time you want to spend with your family, what that relationship with your family looks like. And then, some people have longer term plans as well, especially if they're a business owner. It's like, well, are you going to have this business forever? Are you going to sell it one day? Are you going to pass it on to the owners? Are you going to sell it to a family member or an outside? There's all kinds of questions that can go to.
Before we move on to the last part of the show, expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big, I don't like expectations because somewhere down the line they're going to let you down. But within what you work with your clients, are there such thing as realistic and unrealistic expectations?
As in what can be achieved? Or I like people to set their own expectations. So that's what I'm going to ask them when I work with someone is like, well, so what do you want to do? And typically you would think that someone would come to a business coach because they want to hit the next $1 million, but really it's not like that. Once we know your personal vision, then we go, okay, sensibly, what are we achieving here? Because I can tell you how to make $1 million. I can tell you how to get to an agency that produces $1 million. It's the mathematics behind it is really simple. If you want to be making $1 million in whatever you do, you need to get a new client every month you don't lose. And that client has got to be worth $7,500 every month. So $7,500 in the first month, double that in the second month, triple that in the third month. By the end of 12 months, you'll be making over $85,000 a month, and $85,000 times 12 is $1 million. So the mathematics is simple. Can you get enough people coming to you that will want to buy your service? And then can you do whatever you do good enough to give them results so they stay with you? So pretty much anything. I love it when someone comes to me and I want to make this business 3 million. I'm like, okay, 3 million there by that date. And right now we're here. Let me just fill in the gap for you. That's easy. It's when someone says to me, really what I want to do is on a more personal level. I want to feel satisfaction because I've helped so many people. That's more of a challenge.
Nice. Before we continue on the last segment, I want to, everybody, you're watching Putting Together Conversations. I'm your host, Daniel G. Garza. My guest today is entrepreneur and coach, Mr. Nick Leighton, and we're talking about your whys and what do you love doing. And if you could delegate anything, I would definitely delegate people handling my social media stuff. That is one of my goals.
So that's easy. Come on, you could find someone to do that. Who wouldn't want to do your social media?
I've thought about that. People think that because I'm a spiritual coach, I'm very easily going, but I'm actually my standards are really high when it comes to my stuff, my work stuff.
Should be. Yeah.
There's a level. So if you're looking for an internship with a new up and coming company and would like to handle my social media pages, reach out now. Call
Right.
1-800-555 the boss. No, who knows, man? Like somebody tried calling me. They're like, I tried calling you,
Right.
but you didn't answer.
Yeah, right. What?
So this is the part of the show where I ask my guests to
Right.
share some words of wisdom. Not that you haven't throughout the show, but what are some specific words of wisdom that you would like to share with the audience?
I think the idea that you have to do what's right for you, and that's not right. That's not the same thing as what's right for someone else. So you've got to find yourself. Just find yourself and go off that. And don't feel like you need to be pushed into a 9-to-5 job or getting a traditional education. There are many ways of doing something. And in England, the phrase is there's many ways to skin a cat. Let's not go that far. But what I'm saying is there are so many ways to get what you want. So ultimately, what do we care? We want happiness. That's what we really, really want. So how do we use what we are good at, our passion, to give ourselves happiness? That's what it comes down to. I might be in the business realm. I might deal with business owners and people who are very successful from a business perspective, but really they're just looking for happiness.
That is one thing that I've shared, especially during this last year and a half with folks. I've gotten friends who own businesses who have called me and complained about, like, nobody wants to come back to work, and I'm like, no, they just don't want to work for somebody else. People are choosing to, like we said earlier in the show, I don't want to invest in somebody else's dream. I don't want to be part of somebody else's champagne moment. I want to create my own. And I think that's been the big shift for a lot of folks. Does that make sense?
I totally agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we all got that shift. We all got that nudge at the same time with COVID, unlike anything that any of us have experienced before. Who would have thought, right?
Yeah, I tell people, like, I studied business. My original, and I used to love business. I used to love office management and working for somebody. And I worked in corporate for several years. And as a joke, only because I'm clean and sober, I tell the best thing I learned in corporate was where to buy the best cocaine, and that's still today is it's not true, folks. I did learn a lot of good things, but I left corporate because it wasn't feeding me, and I learned all the bad habits working in corporate. And when I left, there was many years of trying to find my moment and my why, and I finally found it. So that leads to my next question: why do you do this, Nick? Why do you do what you do?
Why do I do this? Because having been an entrepreneur, I know that the feeling it's lonely at the top. People who run and own businesses really don't have anyone to talk to. No one who's not going to judge them and who's going to help them sincerely. And I experienced that. And that is the biggest appreciation that I have when I was a business owner and growing a business. I'm like, oh, this is a group of people and a coach who will listen to me and not judge me. I couldn't go to my parents because they didn't understand what I was doing. I couldn't speak to people who worked for me because they wanted issues that they could solve. I didn't want to go to competitors, and my friends had other things on their mind. So this was what I loved, and that's what gave me success, and it made me who I am. So that's why I love giving that back. And frankly, I love helping. And I think most people who coach feel that way. However you coach, whatever you coach in, you're helping someone. And as we've already said, if you're good at it and it's clicking and you can pass everything around, it's awesome. And I'll tell you, even today, I coached 3 people today. The first person had an issue, and I'm like, that's a really interesting issue. And it was around technology. I'm like, let me research that, and I'll see if I can come back with just a practical solution for you. The coaching the next hour, the person had just done that. I'm like, oh, how do you do that? They're like, this, and this. I'm like, no problem. Wrote it down, emailed it to the first guy. He's super happy. And then the second guy said to me, oh, by the way, I can't do this technically. I'm like, oh, I have a solution for that one. Isn't it great when it all comes together? It's quick and it's super cool and everyone wants the same thing and everyone's interconnected. Love that.
Yeah, I in my spiritual coaching now, when I'm helping people unblock their blockages, uh, I tell them, like, I lived on disability for many years, and I just came off disability in October of 2019, and then in March we hit uh, the lockdown, and everything that I had planned on working on to be independent was like the universe was like, yeah, I know you want that, but
Mm-hmm.
no. And I had to, in the lockdown, sit down and, unbeknownst to me, I was looking for my champagne moments. Like, what do I want to do with my life, and how? Why do I want to? Why do I want to do what I want to do? And I think I asked the questions earlier. Is like, what if, like, can you just change your mind? And I had to, because everything that I was pondering
Right.
on doing wasn't available anymore. So I had to take everything that I was going to do in person and at events and put them online. And so that's why when I talk about social media, I really had to sit down and think about my image. But you answered a lot of, okay, so I used you to answer a lot of my personal questions. So I'm just gonna say that.
But look,
But
look what that brought. You see, now we're doing this, and you're meeting amazing people. And I mean, it's almost impossible for people to get on your show because you're just doing so much of it. It's like you're booked up months in advance, and you're delivering all this great content to people. Awesome. So maybe you felt like, I don't know, Mars was renegade. Is that how you say it in your world? Mars was renegade. Mars was not allowing you to do stuff. So the spirit, all the things were in the wrong place, but you got to stop, think about it, and deliver something better. That's awesome.
yeah, things weren't resonating at one point, and then, which is why, like, I was so happy that we connected when we did, because I was pondering my own existence. Like, am I, like, number one was like, who are you to write a children's book? Like, are you kidding me? Like, who's going to want to buy that? And then I connect with you. And another reason why I wanted to interview you is several years ago, I set a challenge for myself. Is that if I met somebody who made me feel uncomfortable, body, mind, and or spirit, that I wanted to get to know them. If somebody
Nice.
challenged any one of those three things for me,
Mm-hmm.
and it made
Mm-hmm.
me feel odd,
Mm-hmm.
I needed to find out why, because there was something about them that was a mirror to me, and I needed to focus on that. So when I met you and you sent that video, of course, because that's something that probably I would do, I was like, how dare you, Nick? How dare you question me? And
Challenging me? I haven't even
how
met you.
delete, I have to reschedule with you. And then because it made me feel uncomfortable, I was like, I want to meet this dude. Like, I want to know what makes him tick. And then when we finally got to talk, now I'm going to say for everybody watching, whether you know Nick or you want to get to know him, and here's his email, his website, go check him out. I mentioned to Nick a couple of things that I was looking for, that I was interested in, and in that day, he sent me an email with two contacts on it. And I was like, this is my kind of dude. Like, oh yeah, I got a contact for you. Boom, here you go. And the last question before we go, we have about 7 more minutes, but people who have hesitation of sharing information freely, um, what would you say to them? Especially in business, people are so protective of information.
Hey, sure. So there's definitely been this transformation. And so before I was a coach and I had marketing agencies, why would I share anything? Because this is the difference between a coach and a consultant. A consultant, you pay money to, and they go and do something for you. So I used to be a consultant. People would come to me and they go, this is my marketing problem. And we'd say, okay, give us 5, 15, 20, $100,000. We will come and solve that. We'll come back and here's your solution. Thank you very much. That's not what a coach does. A coach talks it through with you and allows you to find your own solution. So there is no secret information here. There's no secret source that I can give anyone. I can just share the knowledge that I have and the tools that we've put together. That's why the 15 questions for your personal vision, I'll share it with you, share it around with everyone. There's no secret there. There's no question I'm going to keep back. So society's changed. Obviously, social media has greatly changed that. But I don't know anyone who is surviving and prospering who is holding information anymore. In fact, the business owners that I work with who are the most successful want to work with me and want to work with the boards that I put together because they want to share this information. There's so many cool things. There's great AI tools out there which people can use. There's great offshoring options to get people because you can't find people here, so you find them somewhere else. There's so many potential things. And the people who give the most get the most back.
Yeah. There's a friend of mine that I've known from Houston. We've known each other for about 15 years, and he was a guest on my show a couple of years ago, which actually became this show now, the combination of the podcast and the live stream shows. And he just launched his own podcast. He's a life coach, but he wanted a spiritual coach to sit next to him so we could offer information. And I was like, that's the kind of shows that I like to do, is where it's like, hey, I've learned this by experience, by falling down, by bumping my head, by making mistakes. And now let me share that with you. Not that you're not going to make mistakes by listening to me, but maybe I can guide you in the right direction. And before we go, I guess that would be my last question is, was there and I put those in quotes sometimes, was there a mistake that you made along the way that ended up being like a step in the right direction for you?
Well, the biggest step in the right direction, which I thought was a mistake, I was living in the Middle East and I came to LA. I'd lived in LA previously. I was at a large event and they had a party in the evening at Hugh Hefner's Playboy Mansion, which I went to. I'm like, well, this is cool. Started chatting to a girl in a black cocktail dress who told me her name was Summer98, which I now realize is not her real name. And although I was living in Dubai, we started dating and that ended up being my wife. So yeah, I was not looking to get married. I was not looking for a partner. I'm sure I was out being the playboy and dating multiple people at the time, and it was all awesome. But it's when you meet that person, right? The person you want to be with for a long time. That's one of the biggest turning points in your life.
There you go, folks. For all you gentlemen out there who are looking, if you ever get invited to the Playboy Mansion or such a party, just say yes. Just say yes.
There you go. Yeah.
Any last comments before we go, Nick?
No, this is awesome. I love what you're doing, and I love the different areas that you're involved in, how they come together. That is super valuable. That's where I can see your passion, and that's where I see you giving that to everyone. So that's beautiful.
Thank you so much. For everybody watching, make sure this is Nick's website. Go check it out. You can connect. He owns a bazillion businesses. So once you Google him, half of the bazillion will probably pop up. So
there you go. Maybe.
Make sure, but if you go here, this will be the main stage and you can connect with him through there. If you want more information on Lunch Club, make sure you reach out and I will send you my personal link so you can join, give me the credit. Nick, thank you so much for being on the show. Please come back.
I'd love that. Daniel, thank you so much. I love what you're doing. Love being here.
Thank you. I'm going to put you in the green room and I'll be back for you in just a second.
Awesome.
For everybody watching, remember we have here at Little Mixer Productions, Inc. If you want to catch us, we have shows every day of the week. Remember, Wednesdays is the Christian and Daniel show. On Fridays, it's the Card Vivo. And on Saturdays is the 2 episodes of Putting Together Conversations. But lately, I've been throwing in some special shows during the week, like today. So make sure that you are following us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Make sure that you hit those subscribe buttons and hit the notification bells to let you know when new shows are, especially if you're watching us on YouTube. We could use the subscribers. If you haven't heard, Grumpy Bunny and the Colors Game. We're selling out the first edition. We're about to change printers, so we're going into the second edition of the book. So make sure you go to any of these outlets and find Grumpy Bunny and the Colors Game, written by me, illustrated by Jennifer and Vivian Gatch. And it's a book on meditation, guided meditation for kids, but it's also good for adults. So make sure you go check it out. We want to thank you. We want to thank Leighton for joining us today. Remember, Putting Together Conversations is a show about folks. It's about you, where you come from, where you are now, and what your journey has been like. And the idea is to motivate and inspire others to go after their dreams and goals. And we hope that today's show has inspired you to go after your dreams and goals. Remember, follow us so you can check out when the next episodes are. Otherwise, we will see you Saturday with another episode. Put it together. Until then, talk to you soon. Bye-bye.